Well, hello again. My name is Joe Hyde with SanAngeloLive.com here in San Angelo, Texas. We're broadcasting live from the West Texas Legislative Summit from the Angelo State University campus. And this entire conference is sponsored by the San Angelo Chamber of Commerce. I have Dan Crenshaw, Congressman from North Houston. I'm not going to get into the CDs because I'm just screwing them all up today.
Houston.
Yep. North Houston sound good. Dan, you are a coalition builder. And before this 2020 election, you had a video out there of all the new freshman congressmen from Texas that you were supporting. August Pfluger was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
How did that work out? Do you think that's a good model for going into the next election, to put together kind of a coalition of congressmen who are Republican? And
yeah, it's good for me. We like making action movies. And,
yeah,
people like watching them. And the behind the scenes, I mean, that particular movie raised each of those candidates $180,000. So
$180,000 per candidate.
Yep.
Wow.
So well over $1 million for the whole thing, just on digital, just from the video going viral. And so it is a good model. All the Republican consultants said it was a waste of money, but there's a reason I don't hire consultants.
Right.
So it was. And
all
it's
the consultants
fun.
in the audience here are
Yeah.
like, they're grimacing.
Yeah. And look, you got to show people that you're having fun.
Right.
You got to change the narrative about what it is to be a conservative, and that's why we did that. And we'll do it again. We've got a lot of great candidates up and coming, and so I like to put some effort behind a handful,
Mm-hmm.
and take back the House.
All right. Well, taking back the House, and everyone's looking toward 2022 and taking back the House, a big election. How are you going to take back the House if the election integrity is always in question? And you obviously you have the Democrats in the House and also in the Senate trying to pass the For the People Act.
Yeah.
It's going to nationalize elections and make universal mail-in ballots like the way to do it.
Well, I would say first, they don't have a good chance of passing it. They'd have to torpedo the filibuster in the Senate to pass that. And even then, it's not totally clear that all the Democrats in the Senate would even they can't lose one vote. But Manchin and Sinema seem pretty intent on keeping the filibuster. So that's the good news, and we should applaud them for that at every moment, because they're effectively saving the republic by doing that, because the Democrat agenda is extremely radical. HR 1 is basically a federal takeover of elections. What it does is it undermines security in elections. It makes it harder for states to implement laws like voter ID, like putting like a lot of the reforms that are recently that we're trying to pass in Texas right now. Really basic common sense stuff. Just putting rules of the road in place. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just that's really all an election is. It's a competition, and you have to have rules. Democrats keep wanting to expand the rules to where there are almost no rules.
Right.
And they claim, well, you want to make it easier to vote, don't you? Well, it's already easy to vote.
Mm-hmm.
It's not hard to vote at all, but you do have to make it hard to cheat so that people can trust the election. Look, there's people have to understand too that this sort of take your ball and go home notion because you're upset about the last election and so my vote doesn't count. Stop it. Just people need to stop that nonsense right now. We're going to win, and we can win within the current system. And anybody who says otherwise is lying to you. Here's some proof. Republicans crushed it in the last election. Donald Trump lost, but
Right.
everybody else crushed it down ballot. And we just need to embrace that reality a little bit. And what happened is the suburbs. I mean, the suburbs turned on Donald Trump. White men turned on Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically, that's what happened in the suburbs. So, in my district, which is North Houston, a little bit of West Houston, it's very suburban, very urban. Trump only won by 1 point. I won by 14 points. This is normal in most suburban districts.
But if you go back a year earlier, or 2 years earlier, with the Cruz versus Beto O'Rourke,
Mm-hmm.
The big thing there was the circles around the urban areas are turning more purple, and the only way Cruz won was by doing a bus tour through Amarillo, Lubbock, Midland, Odessa, San Angelo,
he
Abilene.
got out the vote in the rural areas.
If he got out the vote in the rural areas to make up for his loss of votes in these suburban areas, Do you think that this is going to be a continuing problem for the Republican Party?
Actually, I think we should be more optimistic again because Republicans still won the suburbs. Trump didn't win the suburbs, and Cruz didn't quite either.
Right.
But Cruz only won by 1 point in his Senate race, but Cornyn won by 9.
But Cruz is not like your typical Republican either.
Exactly.
He's more of a firebrand.
It's an outlier.
Yeah.
It's an outlier election. He was also outspent 3-1 by Beto.
Right.
So it's a bit of an outlier election. It should not be seen as the rule. I look in the aggregate across all elections, and again, for the most part, Republican congressmen far outperformed in suburban districts. So the suburbanites have not left the Republican Party. They really don't like radical leftists, but they also don't like mean tweets. I mean, right. It's really that simple. The election is honestly that simple.
Yeah, it's about mean tweets or spinning your country into oblivion.
Yeah, and you wish they'd chosen differently, but they don't.
Yeah, exactly.
So the people choose what they choose.
Exactly. All right. So more on the outreach of the Republican Party. You know, the issues. It's like my son lives in Austin now, and he's my son, and you wouldn't think that he would be a Democrat, but he's a Democrat, right? And I think a lot of it's because he's trying to fit in.
Yeah.
So what the heck? Why is it not cool to be a Republican?
Well, mostly because so many young people are Democrats. I don't know if we're trying to make it cool. I mean, you're right. It's just not. Why? Because demographically, it does seem like the party of old stuffy white men, right? There's not that much cool things about that. We do try to make it cool. We do a massive 4th of July party. That was pretty cool. It attracts a lot of millennials to it. We do a Houston Youth Summit here in September. Which tracks thousands of students. It's going to be really cool. And we make cool action movies. So we're definitely changing the narrative, but it's going to take time, and I need a lot more people on my side to do that. We've done a much better job recruiting candidates, representatives of the Republican Party. But it's always going to be cooler as a young person to be following a cause, to be following this sort of romanticized revolutionary speak, because young people want to feel like they're a part of a team and a cause. And a conservative cause is like, well, hey, what do we want? Incremental change. When do we want it? In due time.
And
as opposed to the left, which is like, what do we want? Action. When do we want it? Now.
And we want to change everything and break all the rules. And
it's a rule breaking. It's very French revolutionary the way the left thinks, and that's very enticing to young people. It takes them time to grow out of that. So it's always difficult.
So there's hope for my son, you think?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Generally, I mean, you see a lot more people transition to being a conservative over time as opposed to the other way around.
Right.
But we can't. We do have to get to young people sooner and earlier, because once you've emotionally invested in voting a certain way, you're statistically more likely to keep voting that way. Right, because your son will just keep rationalizing, even when he sees more and more information that debunks everything he thought and the lies that are told by the left.
But his emotional ties to what he did.
Emotional ties, and it's psychologically devastating to be told that you're wrong.
Right.
Like you don't want to confront that reality, and so it's hard to change your mind on things.
Right.
And they deliberately protect themselves from conservative thought, and this is true. Again, the data proves this, because statistically, a liberal is far less likely to know what a conservative thinks than the other way around. This is true from hundreds of thousands of surveys. And I could point you to the website where they did these studies. But especially on like moral reasoning, liberals just don't know how conservatives think. And I saw this at Harvard too, and I did my master's. They just don't know. They don't even know what our policies are. They're always surprised by them, and I'm never surprised by what they say, because I've lived in their bubbles. I understand exactly what they think. And you read conservative media too. The good conservative media. We have a lot of bad conservative media. But like the good conservative media always addresses the arguments of the left and then counters them. That's a proper way to do argumentation.
Right.
Left-wing media never does. It's narrative building. It's storytelling, and they stick to that story in a very religious-like manner. And it's hard to extract them from.
Give me an example of a story that a conservative type publication could write that would engage, I guess, the millennial.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, we shouldn't engage in we should engage in argumentation, not the narrative building. I'm going to distinguish between storytelling and narrative building.
Gotcha.
So we should definitely tell stories to further our arguments. You're completely right about that, and I'm sure there's there's a lot. We should be talking about sort of the beautiful chaos of the free market more often. Like, why empowerment and responsibility, and it gives you dignity and character and hope in the end, and why these are fundamental goods. Why challenge in life is good and not bad.
Let me tell you what I think on the young, from what I, talking to people and being in the news media business, when I meet young people, they're saddled with college debt.
Yeah.
I mean, I know one guy who he works for me. He's one of our sports writers. He said, I will not pay off my college debt until I'm 52. Mm-hmm. So when you're looking at that, you're like, why do I want to be a capitalist?
Well, first we got to examine the debt problem a little bit more with a little bit more context. The vast majority of debt is held by people with graduate degrees, doctors and lawyers.
Right. Okay.
Vast majority. The average debt beyond that it's actually very low. It's also nobody's fault but yours that you invested in this particular degree and then chose a career that maybe doesn't pay it back.
Right.
That's a financial decision that, so should we be relieving college debt or forgiving it? Absolutely not. I'm not going to have working class Americans' taxes who never got a college degree be used to forgive
or parents like me who paid
degrees.
For their college.
Right. I'm never going to support that. It doesn't mean there's not reforms that could take place, but those reforms are really for the future. I don't think we can change the past, and things like I think an interest rate on a student loan should be different for a STEM degree than it is for an English Lit degree. It should be higher for some of these liberal arts degrees that have a lesser chance of paying it off.
So it's anti-incentive. So you would increase feminist studies would be 12%, where electrical
computer science or something should be a much lower. In colleges, there should be some liability within colleges too. I think universities, especially these universities with huge endowments, I think should bear some responsibility for that debt as opposed to the taxpayer. And that gives them an incentive, by the way, to have a better placement of career paths after college. So I think there's things we can do. Again, financial education prior to taking out that loan, and also just pushing kids towards vocational degrees that aren't as expensive, that pay more,
like Cisco engineer or something like that.
Yeah, and apprenticeships and pipe fitting. There's so many career fields that pay way better than anything you're going to get out of college. Don't cost you as much, maybe not anything, and you can always go to college later after you've put some savings down, after you've matured a little bit.
Right.
You got to take away the stigma of not going to college. You have to go to college right away.
I think a lot of people are not going to college because of the cost, and they hear about their older brother or older sister having so much debt. All right, so that's a deep dive thing. I'm going to ask a short one, okay? The short dive one. So if the Republicans take back the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate, what is right now we're looking at, I'm a small business guy. I'm looking at the government spending like a drunken sailor, devaluation of the dollar, I would think. Inflation on everything. I want to build a building. I don't even know how to plan for it because I don't know how much plywood's going to cost in 6 months or a year. What's your first thing to fix? What could, with the Biden presidency still in place, what could a Republican Senate and Congress do first to fix some of these problems?
Yeah. Well, we do need to have plans in place. It kind of depends on what subject you want to hit, right? Because there's 1,000. Maybe a more difficult question is, what would the Biden administration sign? What would they sign into law? Because I could tell you what legislation would just fix the border crisis, but will the Biden administration sign it? I don't know. They seem intent on allowing a border crisis. It's almost like their goal.
Yeah.
But you've changed the Flores settlement and basically the amount of time that we can hold migrants in custody from 21 days to 90 days.
And the Flores settlement is a court ruling.
It's a court ruling that basically became the law of the land that says you can only hold a minor in custody for 21 days, which makes it impossible to adjudicate those claims and cases through an immigration judge. So that's why catch and release occurred. And this really, that Flores settlement got revisited in 2014. made more lenient, basically. And that's why we've seen wave after wave of crisis every single 2 years. Put into law the migrant protection protocols, the Remain in Mexico policy, the asylum cooperation agreements with Northern Triangle countries. Put these things into law, and then you'll solve the crisis right away. So, but will they sign it? I don't know. You would think so, honestly, because they're taking extreme heat for not solving the border crisis. The American people do not like this, Democrat or Republican. I mean, South Texas is turning more and more Republican because of it. So, that's one thing. Republicans need a better answer on health care. We need to talk about our vision for health care in a much more profound way. We need to talk about personalized medicine and subsidizing patients via health savings accounts. Because the real question in healthcare is, what do you do about the uninsured population, that individual market and the uninsured population? That's the thing that drives everybody crazy. People who can't afford insurance, what do you do about them?
Well, you have the people, and it's always the people in the middle. It's your plumbers making $50,000 a year,
right? Because exactly.
It's not the poor people.
Exactly.
It's right in the middle.
It's the people just outside that poverty level that are eligible for Medicaid. Now, Medicaid's not great either. It's not a good system. Statistically, their outcomes in health are not any better than somebody who's just uninsured. So it's not like nobody gets care in America. The question is because you have to give somebody care if they need it. But
who gets insured?
The question is, how do you pay for it and who's paying for it? So the simple answer is you have to look at healthcare like you look at food, because we don't think food is a right necessarily, but we do think that we have a good reason to make sure people aren't starving in America.
Well, food doesn't cost $100,000 when you walk into the grocery store.
It doesn't, but the philosophy is the same, which is that we subsidize the person buying the food via a voucher, and we tell them to go buy food. Okay,
and so that puts some market controls in there.
Yes, So you're creating a safety net, but you're also utilizing market forces, which create choice and competition and efficiency. And you have to do the same thing with healthcare. Because what the Democrats want to do with healthcare is pretend like you can have your cake and eat it too with a single payer system, but you're going to reduce quality massively with that system, because you're basically just imposing price controls.
You're going to reduce quality and increase total cost. And the cost.
Well, you're like double or triple your taxes to pay for it. That's for sure. You increase the total cost to government.
Right.
It's probably about the same total cost anyway. They're just replacing all that private cost with government cost.
Right.
That's all they're doing. And the notions that they'll save money is a lie. But it'll certainly double or triple your taxes to pay for what they're proposing. And even to pay for that, what they're proposing still underpays doctors and hospitals their current rates, because it still pays at Medicare rates, which is fundamentally a price control, which means you're going to constrict supply, and you're going to have longer wait times, you're going to have less doctors, you're going to have less facilities, because there's just less money flowing into it. And you're not going to have any more innovation and research and development either, because what would the incentive be?
Right.
And they pretend like those trade-offs don't exist, but they exist, and they're pretty severe. So how do you have your cake and eat it too? You have to subsidize the patient. We have to empower patients through health savings accounts. That's the simplest way to put, I think, our vision for healthcare.
Right. Well, we're running long on the interview, but you do have a podcast. Just like, I guess, Ted Cruz has one too. Is it interrupted with a whole lot of commercials, or is it pretty much straight up?
No, because I can't monetize my stuff. So
otherwise
I would.
Tell us about the podcast and how people can download it and subscribe to it.
It's called Hold These Truths. You can download it like you download any podcast. Search for my name. And it's the best podcast out there.
Best one out there?
Yeah, it's probably the best out there. It's it's mostly policy oriented. We hit a lot of different subjects. You will learn a lot with every episode. We release about twice a week.
Okay, good deal. Well, Congressman Crenshaw, thank you for joining us on San Angelo Live, and we want you back here in San Angelo more often.
All right.
Anyway, I'm Joe Hyde with San Angelo Live. This is live from the West Texas Legislative Summit at the campus of Angelo State University, and we're out.
Okay.